time.
Well, thanks. Yeah. So just let me paste the sheet in the chat. People know what I'm looking at. So I see a couple of new faces, so I'm not sure if you've heard about this project before, but we're working on a secure or supply chain integrity framework called SALSA within this working group. And we have created an every other week meeting. So just wanted to call that out if folks are interested in that project. I missed the first community meetings. I didn't have power, but I looked at the follow-up notes and it was recorded. They talked a lot about governance and goals for the project and sorting all that out. So the links are in the meeting notes that I just posted in chat for those interested. And that's all I have to say about that. And then I think Azra is giving us a presentation on the update framework in SigStore. Is there any other topics that folks want to discuss today? Or Azra kicks it off? No. Cool. All right. It's all you.
All right. Just make sure that this will present. All right. Okay, cool. I think everyone can see it because I can see it. So this is kind of like a follow-up update from like the presentation on SigStore and TUF that I gave like maybe 2 months ago here. And so there is a link to the presentation like somewhere in the agenda notes if you want to look at the previous one, which is like a little bit more background focused. And I'm not going to go too much into like background about TUF in this one, but I just kind of wanted to tell everyone about what's going on with TUF and SigStore and like the sort of different fronts that it's like appearing in the various parts of the SigStore ecosystem. So there's like lots of different like angles and things like that I kind of want to give an update on. And I would love feedback and feel free to stop me at any point. Just like a quick reminder, again, I'm not going to go too much into like the details and internals about TUF, but just like a high level about like what it is and what it's used for. It basically comes down to like any sort of like, you know, secure update system. So whether that means like updating your PKI securely in case you're doing key rotation or like, you know, revoking keys in case of compromise or you want to, you know, update your like, you know, push other types of updates in a secure manner, like maybe you're using in Toto to secure your build pipeline. So it kind of all boils down to like this framework called TUF. And what it also does, like in addition to supporting these like secure update ways, it also provides like role responsibility divisions and like multi-signature trust in case you wanted to support something like a threshold signature where you have like maybe 2 out of 5 maintainers sign off on project artifact signatures or sign off on project artifacts by providing signatures. So that's kind of like the high level overview of it. And when it comes down to like the internals, there's sort of a separation of about, you know, kind of 4 roles plus any sort of additional roles that you want to define that all have different responsibilities. So for example, there's a role that defines every other type of trusted key role. That's the top level root that we'll talk a little bit more about. And then there's other roles that, you know, sign off on actual artifacts and targets, which is also like, you know, another top level role. And then there's all the other sorts of roles that provide consistency or provide, you know, heartbeat timestamps to ensure that a client knows it is pulling the latest versions. All right, so that's kind of like the background about TUF. No need to know too much about it beyond that. And the sort of like pictorial view about what's going on, although I hope this doesn't like confuse you more, is that there's that top level role right there called the root, which like, you know, delegates trust down to like these other 3 top level roles called the timestamp, actually snapshot, not release, and targets. And each of those have different responsibilities for whether they're signing off on the metadata for a higher level target to ensure like, you know, a up-to-date version, or whether they are assigning artifacts for in the case of targets. So that's kind of like what's going on in this whole system. And the goal is in this framework that it like, you know, mitigates like certain threats, like having freeze attacks or, you know, making clients like download old versions and things like that. So that's kind of the goal of it. And so now on like the SigStore side of this, like where are we kind of looking to integrate TUF? And so there's actually like, there's a multitude of ways that we are like, you know, kind of putting TUF like either under the hood for verification and like securing SigStore itself, and then also exposing it for end users and developers in like a simple manner, in like sort of a SigStore style manner. So the first, these are kind of like the 4 areas. The first is like actually securing our own metadata with kind of like a follow-up from like the root signing ceremony and like where we're going with that. There are other updates and like, you know, providing storage for TUF types in Rekor, which I'll talk a little bit more about why and what that looks like. And then the other one is something that we talked about last time in a bit of detail, which is the Fulcio OIDC key types to kind of simplify developer PKI. So that, you know, developers can like use TUF without having to deal with, you know, managing and creating their own public keys and things like that. And then the final one is like a kind of concrete integration of like a sort of very simple style of TUF that we're hoping people will be able to like adopt and use easily and then build off of that. And this kind of comes down to like, okay, yeah, the demo last time is like super, super complicated. Where can we start just from like a simple place? And the hope is that this 4th one is that starting point. Okay, so with this first one of like SigStore root verification, and then like where we're going with that in terms of like, you know, how we're going to build off of that. What we currently have in cosign is a way that cosign verifies TUF metadata from the SigStore root signing ceremony. And so what it kind of does is, you can look at that linked issue over there if you want to follow up on the links of the actual code. But if a user runs cosign init, it creates a repository where all of the like verified downloads of your SigStore root metadata go. And so that includes things like the Fulcio and Rekor keys, and also like the cosign artifact key. So instead of having hard-coded certs and keys that cosign is currently using, what this mechanism now does is actually like securely fetches the updated versions. So, you know, if we have like another root signing ceremony, hopefully in October, and we rotate out those keys, cosign ends up updating those. And so we are like, this mechanism of TUF is like securing cosign itself by making sure that we have like the actual trusted artifacts for when we're verifying like Fulcio certificates. Does that make sense? It's kind of like the simple version. Phase 1, I guess, 0 maybe. Yeah, so where are we going with this part of this? So cool, we have like SigStore root metadata verified and everything, but like that only goes so far. Like that's just, you know, verifying Fulcio and not really like allowing other projects to kind of bootstrap off of this. So what we're hoping to do is that TUF exposes this way of delegating trust to other roles, which is, you should probably think of it like as an analogy of like how a root CA delegates trust to an intermediate CA. And so what we are planning on doing is that next time we do like a root signing ceremony, that we include some delegations for other projects in our root metadata. So that way other projects don't have to deal with setting up their own root ceremonies, but they can bootstrap off of our trust. And so in the diagram on the right probably is the most easiest way to see this, but we have our SigStore root that we created during our root signing ceremonies, and we'll update every time we do any root signing. But then on the other side of like the signing keys that we've had in our TUF metadata, we're also going to be delegating trust to other projects' TUF metadata. So this other project would be like distro lists who might want to sign their releases, and they might have their own TUF metadata that can enable them to sort of update their artifact signing keys in a secure way, also deal with like thresholds in case they have like multiple maintainers who want to sign off on the artifacts. And they don't have to deal with the whole like, you know, live stream ceremony there. So what we're hoping to do is kind of extend the TUF SigStore root metadata to include other people's roots by this means of delegation. Mm-hmm.
Is this like self-serve for other projects then that want to be delegated, or like does the SigStore cosign folks have to do something special? Yeah, so how it would kind of work is like a mix of both. So what we would have to do is sign off that there is a delegation, but they manage their own delegation. So they would be able to manage their own like, you know, updates for key rotation and things like that. But we would have to say like, yes, we are endorsing that distro list as a project. You might look at this, but is there a way for projects to say they're interested right now, or am I jumping ahead in your slides? No, I think they should, because we're, especially since like, I mean, on the table right now is distro list. If you do want to, maybe we can like make an issue in cosign for it, or SigStore.
Yeah, that's a good point. I'll maybe send like a Slack channel message to like kind of advertise this and post this out.
I think there is a tracking issue somewhere. I can try to dig it up. There's like rough notes on some kind of pull request process where somebody would file all the info and we would check it and review it and then merge it and it would be good to go.
Sweet.
We haven't tried it.
Yeah, I think the goal is to like kind of dog food it a little bit with distro list first in a couple of projects, but it's always good to have more people are interested in being the early adopters.
Okay.
Yeah, so like kind of the way that it would work is like in point B right there, if you wanted to say like cosign verify some artifact in other projects repository, then we would be able to sort of like do a search and find, okay, this is the correct metadata that we're trying to pull from. Let me go get the signing keys. And so an end user doesn't need to be like, okay, this is the signing key that we need, because we pull it automatically from the TUF metadata, which is up to date all the time. So the client doesn't have to ever deal with like, okay, I don't know what the current updated key is. That makes sense? Cool. So that's part one. Part two, this is like another simple, like easy integration that we have here, is that we have a Rekor TUF type. So you're able to push, you're able to upload TUF metadata onto Rekor. And you might ask like, okay, what benefit does it give you? So SigStore is like, kind of independent from TUF and Intoto and other types of things. So TUF provides like this way of updating things securely. You can kind of think of SigStore as like another layer on top of that might provide auditability, public, transparency, holding the actual person who's using TUF accountable for whatever they're signing. So because like, we have an immutable history now of all your signing events, you're now kind of able to say, okay, I am actually doing this in process and I'm not, messing it up, and people will be able to detect whether, hey, something looks kind of wrong because you've just published that version 3 is the updated version, and now later on you're publishing that version 2 is the updated version. So maybe something is wrong. So that's kind of the idea here. And we're hoping to get Datadog on board with this as soon as it lands, which is like, a day out or two. And so what they're planning on doing is issuing all of their timestamps and snapshots, again, like this version history, up to Rekor. And so again, you'd be able to detect if you have kind of these forking attacks or split view attacks, where maybe one client receives that version 3 as the updated version and the other one receives that version 2 as the updated version. They'll be able to sort that out by checking if Rekor is actually, has logged version 3 later than version 2. And also, like, if you want to see more about like what added value a transparency log has on TUF, you can click that like third link right there. A blog post that Trishank and Marina wrote about like what, added value that you get from having an immutable history of the TUF metadata. It's kind of like a record keeping service, which is exactly what Rekor is. And we also have this idea that like later on, you can actually like simplify the whole TUF stack, because so the way that TUF works is the last kind of role of this is that timestamp role. So every single day, recommended a day, but you can extend it for however long you want. Every single day you say, okay, this is the current latest version of all of the versions of stuff that you need. Instead of making the developer like responsible for issuing all of those heartbeats, what you could do is have Rekor responsible for issuing heartbeats on its own by issuing like, timestamps every single day to say, hey, my log is up to date. In which case, clients who are verifying metadata can say, okay, I know my log is up to date. What is the log saying the latest version is? So this kind of removes the responsibility of the developer to say, like, every day, this is the current version. So that would be kind of cool, and remove a lot of responsibility from the developer side. All right. This is kind of like just the way that it would work in TUF. So you would send your metadata, which is the actual file that you want. So in this case, maybe like a timestamp of like the current versions that you have. And then you would have to issue also what your root JSON is, which is the top level role that is delegating what trust to put in each of the keys. That's only there for verification, right? So we don't want people to say like, okay, I'm going to upload like anything that looks like TUF metadata to Rekor. That would just be like crazy spammy. We do want actual valid TUF metadata up there. So you would need to provide a root, which is basically your public key role. Yeah. And yeah, it works. You can do that. As you can see, like if I can upload, I've actually uploaded SigStore's TUF metadata up to this instance of Rekor. So I've uploaded the timestamp for that we issued in our root key ceremony, and also the root JSON that we collaboratively signed. And as you can see, like, it pushes this metadata file up to Rekor. All right, so yeah, that's kind of like a simple thing. We're hoping Datadog gets on board with that pretty soon and trials that out. And yeah, the next part is what I kind of talked about in our last meeting about how, so in general, TUF, you would still need to, create your own and manage your own public keys and private keys, which is still like, kind of a burdensome thing on developers. And the really nice thing about SigStore is that we have our own web PKI Fulcio solution there where you can actually rely on OIDC identities instead. So what we have right now is a top proposal out for simplifying this developer key management using Fulcio. And support totally keyless mode where you aren't using public keys to denote what keys are responsible for what roles, but you're actually using emails and issuers, especially for things like target signing, which is a lot easier to do when you just have to rely on the OIDC flow. So what our proposal is that when you issue a target key, you actually issue a SigStore OIDC type that includes an email and an issuer. So the email would be, us@google.com, and then would have an issuer like Fulcio. And then when we actually want to sign some portion of the metadata, we reference the certificate that the issuer provided for the email address. And on verification, you would do exactly the same steps of verification that you would normally do, where you check that the subject field matches the email, and the public key inside the certificate is what signed the signature, is what signed the message. And finally, that the time that the metadata was actually issued, was actually signed corresponds to the time that the certificate was valid. So our hope is that also all of these will be all these signing events will be uploaded to Rekor so that you can do that time verification. So yeah, we're making progress on that. The top proposal is out, and we're doing pretty much we just have half a PR, a review of a PR out to finish the Go TUF development to support this new type of key. So our hope is in the next couple of weeks, we'll have this out and people using it. And the way that they will use it. Any questions on that, by the way?
So the issuer here is a root cert?
Yeah, effectively, yep.
Okay.
Yeah, so in practice, it's a URI to Fulcio, but yeah, only to root the idea that you have some a root CI to verify against. I suppose actually I mean, if you have ideas about okay, maybe that actually should be a reference to a root CI URL, feel free to ping me about that. I don't think I don't think that that's the reason why we have it, but it might not be the best reference for it. All right, and also you can check out the TAP proposal linked over here. I put the slides inside the agenda if you want to actually click through the links. But if you want to comment on the TAP proposal itself to give some feedback on the format here, if you think there's something missing, feel free. All right, and so how are we actually going to use this? This is the kind of final last starting point of how we're going to build TUF into cosign from the ground up. So this cosign sqet policy, Luke has been working on this doc about it. You can click that hyperlink up there for Luke's doc. And so the idea behind this is that we can sort of start from the simplest part of TUF, which is just the root policy that delegates what keys to trust or what roles to trust, because we're actually going to be using Fulcio identities to what's going to sign the artifacts. So what we're going to be doing is creating just a simple root.json, which follows the TUF metadata style to say, okay, these are the roles that are responsible for signing the targets in this container registry namespace. And so each of the maintainers who are responsible for signing artifacts in there would use an OIDC email address using these SigStore OIDC key types, and define a threshold for signing in case it's 2 out of 3 or 2 out of 5 or whatever. And then again, publish all these signing events to Rekor in order to do the verification of the Fulcio OIDC signatures. And then again, the client would do verification based on before. So we're kind of removing the need for timestamp and snapshot right now and kind of only relying on a threshold and updatable version of target signers as a simple first step of using TUF. And then the future work would be to add in the same like verifications you get from having a timestamp and like version, current version update metadata by utilizing Rekor. So what it currently would look like, if you look at that pull request, you can generate some metadata like this, referencing like a certain registry namespace, and then 2 keys based on email and issuers with a threshold of 1. So this is like sort of the most basic of basic, kind of enabling you to be able to update this root policy and be able to have a threshold, but not necessarily be able to protect against things like a freeze attack yet, because those roles of like the versioning roles like snapshot and timestamp aren't present. That make sense? Yeah, so that's kind of our first step of like total simplification of TUF. It's like a very loose style of TUF, but it's a good starting point to have. And then those like later on roles can also be like utilized with like verifying on Rekor and not having people, fill up their registry with a bunch of TUF metadata. That is a little bit, I don't know. I don't think it's complicated, but it's definitely a lot. So yeah, that's kind of where we're at on like these, 4 different fronts of like, using TUF to verify our own, and then also like allowing developers to use a very simple style of TUF. Yeah, that's kind of all I have. I just wanted to update you on like those 4 different things. And like, again, if you think like things are missing, or if you have like ideas for like how to make this, a little bit more usable or a little bit more understandable, or if you have like any sorts of ideas at all, feel free to ping me on Slack or create issues or whatever. So again, a bunch of links to docs. Dan has like a nice blog post about kind of all of this in words if you like reading blog posts. And again, yeah, thank you so much like to the TUF community. Like all of this would have been like, like a lot of work was done by a lot of people and in the SigStore community to like get all of this rolling.
Do the TUF folks have their own meeting too, or sync regularly? Maybe that's worth adding somewhere for these folks.
Yeah, I can drop a link in the chat. The TUF community group meeting, I think, is on Wednesdays, but it's the other Wednesdays, not the Wednesdays that this is on.
Alternating, perfect.
Yeah.
That might actually overlap with the salsa meetings, but I'm short of meetings.
Have you defined at all the process for proving control of a registry namespace and like defined what a registry namespace is? I'm curious, like, what if there are overlapping claims, like you had like /project/ like container. What if somebody else claims just /project or the domain name itself?
Yeah, on the sqet stuff, right? Yeah, this I would like to like kind of hash out a little bit more with Luke, because it's also like the reason why we need to have a reference at all to the registry namespace is because we don't want someone to just drop in a totally different root into your namespace and then have verification fail because they've dropped in their own root or something worse to happen. And so tying in like you definitely do need to have a way to say this root references this namespace. But it's complicated because you have to hold some trust in the registry, like you were saying. I don't know if it's worth like the way that like normal TUF gets around this is that like everything is based on like relative paths. You don't really, a root will define the policy for everything in that directory, and you already have trust in your file system there if you're going to pull the metadata from it. But it's a little bit more complicated with the registry. I will drop I think it's worth putting that comment if it's not already there in this sqet root policy doc. Because yeah, I'm still not totally sure like how to sort of pin that beyond like potentially like obviously Rekor gets a view of it by seeing that signature, so you could see like okay, like who has pushed a signature onto it like first maybe, but I'm not really sure what the answer is there.
Okay, yeah, I have the slides open. I'll read through the references and let you know if I have any thoughts. Thank you.
Awesome.
Well, any other questions? No? Thank you, Ezra. This was great.
Thank you, everyone.
What's that?
Yeah, thank you to everyone for like comments.
I put the links to the slides again in the agenda so you can see them there. And that's all we had on the agenda today, unless anyone else wants to bring up any last topics. No. Cool. All right. Have a good day, everyone.